First of all, thank you again for coming to today's session. Second of all, thank you for attending my 5-minute segment on student agency and participatory course adjustments. Now, I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with the holy trinity of course design, alignment between learning goals, instructional strategies, and assessments. And back in summer 2022, when I was thinking about course design, one thing that popped out to me was, when, if at all, do students make decisions, whether individually or collectively, in the course design process? And at least in my experience as a student, a lot of the times the answer is no, I don't get to make those decisions per se. So that's when I turned to participatory course adjustments. Really, I borrowed a lot of the language and also frameworks from community-based participatory research. This is basically a collaborative course adjustment process that involves instructor and students' inputs that evolves dynamically over the course of learning. So that could be a semester, that could be a quarter, doesn't matter the time frame. And importantly, because we incorporate adjustments from students' input live as the course is happening, we are also proactively accounting for students' varying learning needs and goals, which may also be changing over time. And I think this is very crucial to equity, inclusion, and diversity because, for example, it's a lot easier to account for students changing shifts at their part-time job, right? If we are dynamically making room for that compared to if we just fix it from the get-go without students' input. So for some context, I was implementing this, a number of strategies, but in particular, the one I'm going to be talking about in this upper level project-based research methods course, 19 students in total. This was in fall 2022. It was a requirement for psychology majors. Not everyone wanted to be there. One thing that I implemented was something I called the thumbs up, thumbs down exercise. So for every single class, without fail, the first 5 minutes are always a check-in about the course or about students' general well-being. I pose a check-in question in the form of a yes-no question, and students can answer in a thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no, or a thumbs horizontal for something in between or something different. One thing I noticed is that as I keep insisting on these 5-minute check-ins, I saw increased engagement in the check-in portion and also in the content portion of the class as the semester progresses. A few confounds here, right? But still something to note. The second thing is that some students were actually willing to elaborate on their thumbs up or thumbs down choices. So I'm not just getting a temperature read of the room, I'm getting some context for why the temperature is reading in a particular way for any particular class. So that leads to the first principle, which is about frequent low-stakes check-in. Essentially, I'm trying to build in a consistent space to check in on students' well-being and also to potentially hold meta discussions about course design. Now, what aspect of course design is open for student feedback is a little bit of a more complex discussion for what 5 minutes can cover. But one thing that I did, for example, was about checking in on the difficulty, alignment, and also schedule of the assessments relative to the learning objectives of the class. So, for example, I found out during the first check-in of week 2 that the weekly quizzes are too short in terms of duration. So I increased the weekly quiz duration from 20 to 30 minutes so that students have more time to actually read the questions properly. Another thing I found out was that the take-home assignments, students were requesting more time so that they can actually submit their best work. I had to take the discussion offline to negotiate with my teaching team about how much earlier we can actually release the assignments, came back to the students, said we can do it 1 day earlier. And that's what the students agreed to. So now students have 1 more day to actually complete their assignment. That leads to principle number 2, which is about transparent and honest negotiation. I found it was very helpful to openly discuss what course design changes are needed and feasible. I didn't make all the changes that students requested, however. So, for example, this was after the mid-semester feedback point. A few students were, or specifically one student was talking about how the readings in the course seemed politically charged. And this came after the research ethics module. So what I did was I conducted a whole class follow-up discussion that was about 15 minutes long about why I included the research and ethics module, why I needed it to be there. And I asked for feedback about how to improve the module, make it more integrated and more accessible to students. So students had a better understanding of why I did that, and they actually gave some good suggestions for making the module more accessible later on. That leads to principle number 3, which is to properly follow up on design choices and explain those choices to students. So ultimately, in my mind, that's just one of the many ways we can implement participatory course adjustments, but it requires redistributing power. As an instructor, I have a lot of power in determining what students learn and how students learn that content. And I have to grow comfortable with deciding to share that power with students to affirm their agency in the classroom. Of course, power is complex. I'm an instructor. I'm also a Southeast Asian light-skinned person who can present feminine sometimes. I'm also more junior in my profession, and that tilts the power planes along which I'm interacting with the students as well. Happy to have that discussion during the Q&A. But that's kind of all the content that I have for today. Thank you very much again.